Welcome to our brief discussion on legitimacy theory. Legitimacy theory asserts that organisations are continually trying to influence society's perceptions about them. They want society to see them as legitimate. Under legitimacy theory, we can expect firms to run their operations in ways that meet society's expectations. Now, this is a theory that goes deeper than just suggesting that organisations want to be loved. They may well want to be loved, but there are real economic and social reasons for this. Legitimacy theory relies heavily on the social contract. It implies that there is a contract representing the norms and expectations of both businesses and society. And like society itself, I guess, the terms of the social contract can be very difficult to pin down. Societies change all the time, and so do their expectations and norms. And so many firms have been caught out seemingly complying with the expectations of society, but quite rapidly they find themselves being on the outer. And right at this moment, coal mines are finding themselves really on the outer with elements of society, not the whole of society. So you just need to be aware of the activist campaigns against the setting up of the new Adani coal mine, for example. They see coal mines as being the agents of carbon pollution and global warming. And so they are definitely impacting on the ways that these companies can raise capital. So the social contract works quite roughly as follows. The firm submits to the restrictions of society's expectations. In other words, they're not free to lie, cheat, plunder, do whatever they please in order to make a quick profit. But in return, society approves by granting the firm legitimacy in its estimations. And this helps the firm secure its flow of capital. So the owners of Adani at the moment are struggling to get legitimacy in Australian society. And as a direct consequence of that, they are finding it very difficult to raise capital. And just a few days ago, we had the extraordinary revelation from Westpac Bank that they would no longer conduct loans with mining companies. So legitimacy is more than a firm's need to be loved by society. If you're considered legitimate, then you can tap into capital flows. If you're not considered legitimate, then this becomes so much harder. And the difficulty for firms is that legitimacy is not something that they can give themselves. No doubt companies try to do this, would like to do this, but legitimacy is something that is bestowed by society. So coal mines are sort of sitting considered legitimate by some people, not legitimate by others. Tobacco companies, on the other hand, are quite on the bad side of society. So firms can only seek to be considered legitimate. To do that, they need ways to be considered legitimate. They need to play nice with society. And so accounting disclosures are a very important way of doing this. So if a company is failing to achieve the required level of legitimacy and they're finding it quite expensive to raise capital, get people to work for them, etc., then you'll tend to find that they will make disclosures in their financial report that attempt to address society's concerns. And so no doubt you'll find announcements from Adani, for example, that seek to address concerns that may be legitimate or not legitimate by society. Firms are thought to go through a life cycle or phases of legitimacy. First of all is the gaining of legitimacy. Society says, well, you're all right. We consider you ethical. We consider that you can and do contribute to society. So we'll buy your shares. We have no problem if the banks forward you loans and so on. And in recent years, we've seen companies gain legitimacy in society that weren't even there a few years before. So think Uber and Airbnb, for example. The much more difficult phase is maintaining or repairing legitimacy. So consider, if you follow the news from Delta Airlines in the United States, they've had a lot of very bad press recently. Some bad incidents have been happening on their aeroplanes. And so they're going to have to go through a process of repairing their legitimacy with society. If they don't, then they find that society doesn't play nice with them. Passenger bookings might decrease, share prices will decrease, banks and other sources of capital may not choose to deal with them with generous terms, because dealing with a company that is not as legitimate as other firms increases the risk for banks and investors to deal with them. Finally, there is the loss and abandonment. At a certain point, companies think it's not worth trying to be Mr. Nice Guy to everybody. And a good example of that is big tobacco. So it takes a lot of money, a lot of effort, and a lot of other resources on behalf of firms to maintain their image of legitimacy within society. And sometimes the pendulum has gone too far and they consider, well, we're not illegal, we're paying our taxes, the government's not going to shut us down, but we're the bad boys and we might as well accept that. Legitimacy does not equal accountability. Accountability represents the extent that the firm's governance requires those with responsibilities inside the firm fulfill them. So people inside the firm are being held accountable. Legitimacy is on the other side of the firm's boundary. It's the extent to which society thinks the firm is legitimate. There are some problems with legitimacy theory. Some of these criticisms are fair, some not so much, but they are criticisms and you need to know it. It's difficult to come up with research that empirically measures legitimacy. So if you're an accountant or an accounting academic and you feel more comfortable with theories that support hypotheses, data collection, objective reasoning, then you have a lot of trouble with legitimacy theory, because how do you measure what society thinks? I think that's a little bit unfair, because theories do give us interesting insights. They do give us important stories that allow us to understand how accounting information is being used. So the mere fact that you can't measure it reliably doesn't mean that it's not valuable. Sometimes legitimacy theory might be a bit too simplistic. Sometimes management might be playing a longer game rather than simply seeking the immediate recognition of legitimacy from society. Others say, well, legitimacy theory might be showing us nothing more than regular risk management that every board of directors should undertake. Again, that's a little unfair, because what doesn't involve risk management? You could make that criticism, I think, of every single theory of accounting. So there's a little slide there that sets out my concerns about these criticisms. So that's the end of my quick presentation on legitimacy theory. I think it's a very powerful theory and offers us a lot of opportunities for learning how society deals with the information that accountants provide to them. So I highly recommend learning more about legitimacy theory. So our next presentation will be another interesting theory called stakeholder theory, and I'll see you then.